The old apartment building on Elm Street stood like a forgotten sentinel in the quiet suburb of Millford, its brick facade weathered by decades of Midwestern rain. Sarah had noticed it the first time she drove through town 2 weeks ago on her way from Chicago after the divorce. It wasn't flashy. 4 stories of faded red brick, narrow windows like watchful eyes, and a rusted fire escape snaking down the side, but the rent was cheap, and the ad promised cozy units with character. She needed a fresh start, somewhere the silence didn't echo with memories. That first evening, as the sun dipped below the line of maple trees, Sarah lugged her last box up the creaky stairs to the 3rd floor. The lobby smelled of aged wood and faint mildew, the kind that lingers in places where too many stories have been told. Mrs. Harlan, the landlady, had handed her the keys with a tight smile, her eyes darting toward the elevator that no one seemed to use. "Welcome, dear. Elevators are finicky these days. Stairs are safer." Sarah nodded, too tired to question it. Her unit, 3B, was at the end of the hall, overlooking the parking lot, where a single street lamp buzzed faintly. Inside, the space felt lived in but empty. Hardwood floors scuffed from years of footsteps, a kitchenette with linoleum counters, and a living room that opened to a small balcony. She unpacked slowly, arranging books on the shelves, hanging a few photos of her old life, her with friends at a lakeside picnic, the ones she'd left behind. The building was quiet, almost too much so. No thumping bass from neighbors, no arguments filtering through thin walls, just the occasional creak of settling beams, like the place was breathing. By midnight, Sarah couldn't sleep. Jet lag from the move, she told herself, or maybe the unfamiliar mattress. She padded to the kitchen for a glass of water, the floor cool under her feet. That's when she heard it, a low, rhythmic thump, distant but insistent, coming from below, like someone dragging something heavy across concrete. She froze, glass halfway to her lips, straining to listen. The sound paused, then resumed, softer now, almost tentative. It was coming from downstairs, she realized. From the basement. She set the glass down and walked to the window, peering out at the dark lot. No cars moving, no lights on in the other units. The building had 12 apartments. She'd counted on the mailboxes, but only a handful seemed occupied. An elderly couple on the 1st floor, a single guy who nodded curtly in the hall, and Mrs. Harlan's door always cracked open like an invitation she hadn't accepted. No one had mentioned a basement, but every old building had one. Storage, maybe laundry. The thump came again, fainter, like it was retreating. Sarah shook it off. Probably the maintenance guy, fixing pipes or something. She climbed back into bed, pulling the covers tight, but sleep evaded her. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, chasing away the shadows. Millford was the picture of small-town normalcy. A main street with a diner serving bottomless coffee, a grocery store where the cashier knew everyone's name, and endless flat fields stretching to the horizon. Sarah drove to the local library to apply for jobs, something in admin, maybe teaching part-time. The routine felt grounding, a way to stitch herself back together. Back at the building that afternoon, she bumped into Mr. Ellis, the guy from 2A, as he fumbled with his mail. He was in his 50s, wiry build, with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow. "New here?" he asked, glancing at her box of groceries. "Yeah, just moved in. Sarah." He nodded, not smiling. "Quiet place, keeps to itself." His eyes flicked toward the stairwell leading down, the one marked "Basement Residents Only." A chain hung loosely across it, more suggestion than barrier. "You settling in all right?" "Fine so far. Heard some noises last night, though. From below?" Ellis paused, rifling through his envelopes a little too slowly. "Noises? Like what?" "Just thumping. Maybe the furnace?" He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Furnace is ancient. Kicks up sometimes. Don't worry about it." He turned away, keys jingling, and disappeared into his apartment. Sarah shrugged it off again, unpacking her kitchen things. But as evening fell, the unease crept back. She cooked a simple pasta dinner, the kind her mum used to make. Nothing fancy, just comfort. Eating at the small table, she noticed the building's rhythm. The faint hum of a TV from 3A, the clink of dishes somewhere above. Normal sounds, reassuring even, yet when she rinsed her plate, there it was again, that muffled thump, deeper this time, like a footfall on stone. Closer, as if echoing up from the vents. She wiped her hands and stepped into the hall, listening. The corridor was dim, lit by a single bulb that flickered like it was on its last breath. No one else around. Curiosity tugged at her, the kind that starts small but grows. The basement door was at the end of the first-floor landing. She'd passed it without thinking on move-in day. Why not check? It was her building now, too. Descending the stairs, the air grew cooler, thicker, carrying that same mildew scent from the lobby, but sharper, like damp earth. The chain was undone, dangling like an afterthought. She pushed the door open, hinges groaning softly. A narrow staircase plunged into darkness, lit only by a bare bulb swinging from a cord. The steps were concrete, worn smooth in the center. At the bottom, a hallway stretched left and right, doors lining the walls. Storage units, probably, with padlocks on most. "Hello?" Her voice bounced back, swallowed quickly. No answer. The thump didn't repeat, but now she heard something else, a faint scrape, like fabric against metal from the far end. She took a step forward, heart picking up pace, the darkness pressing in. Why did it feel like the walls were leaning closer? Then, a light snapped on overhead, harsh and yellow. Sarah blinked, shielding her eyes. Footsteps echoed from above, someone coming down. She turned, but the door at the top was swinging shut, the chain rattling as it latched. Panic flickered, but she pushed it down. Just Mrs. Harlan, maybe, checking on things. "Sarah?" The landlady's voice floated down, muffled. "That you down there?" "Yeah, I heard some noise. Thought I'd see." A pause, longer than it should be. "Best not to go poking around. Basement's off limits these days. No one uses it anymore." The words hung in the air, simple but weighted. Sarah climbed back up, the door clicking open for her. Mrs. Harlan stood there, arms crossed, her face pale in the lobby light. "Just keeping things safe, dear. Old building, you know." Sarah nodded, forcing a smile. But as she rode the stairs to her floor, opting out of the elevator this time, the thump echoed once more in her mind, faint, retreating. Like whatever was down there knew she'd been listening. That night, sleep came in fits. She dreamed of endless corridors, doors that opened to nothing, and a shadow that moved just out of sight. When she woke, the clock read 3:17 a.m. And the building was silent. Too silent. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the quiet was hiding something, or if she'd imagined the whole thing. But deep down, she knew. The basement wasn't empty. It was waiting. The days blurred into a tentative routine, the kind Sarah clung to like a lifeline in Millford's unhurried pace. Mornings started with coffee from the diner's bottomless pot, where locals swapped stories about high school football games and the latest crop yields. She filled out applications at the library, her fingers tapping idly on the keyboard while the scent of old books grounded her. Afternoons were for walks along the cracked sidewalks of Elm Street, past the hardware store with its bins of nails, and the pharmacy where the pharmacist, Mr. Wilkins, always asked after her day with a nod that felt neighborly but distant. Back at the apartment, she avoided the basement door, though it loomed in her thoughts like a half-remembered dream. Mrs. Harlan's warning echoed, "Off limits, no one uses it anymore," but the words only sharpened her curiosity. Why chain it if it was empty? And that thump, rhythmic and deliberate, wasn't the furnace. She'd convinced herself of that much. The building's silence wrapped around her like a fog, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the windows or the distant hum of a neighbour's radio tuned to country stations. On her third evening, Sarah decided to test the waters. She knocked on Mr. Ellis's door, the one across from the stairwell carrying a plate of oatmeal cookies she'd baked, a small-town gesture, something her mum swore by for breaking the ice. The door opened a crack, and Ellis peered out, his shadow stretching long in the hallway light. "Sarah, right? What's this?" "Just being neighbourly," she said, offering the plate. "Figured we could chat. You seem like you've been here a while." He hesitated, then stepped aside, gesturing her in. His apartment mirrored hers, but felt more entrenched. Stacks of newspapers on the coffee table, a faded armchair facing a black-and-white TV flickering with a baseball game. No photos on the walls, just a calendar from the local feed store pinned crookedly. "Sit if you want, but I don't get many visitors." She perched on the edge of the couch, the springs creaking under her. "How long have you lived here?" 10 years, give or take." He took a cookie, biting into it without enthusiasm. Before that it was quieter, fewer folks moving in and out. Sarah leaned forward, keeping her tone light. "Mrs. Harlan seems nice, runs a tight ship, huh? What about the basement? She mentioned it's off limits." Ellis's chewing slowed, his eyes fixed on the TV where a batter swung and missed. The crack of the bat was the only sound for a moment. "Yeah, been that way since. 5 years back. Some issue with the foundation, they said. Water damage or whatever. No one's supposed to go down, but I've heard things, noises like thumping." He set the cookie down, wiping crumbs from his shirt. "Building's old. Settles at night. Pipes groan. You get used to it." His voice was even, but he didn't meet her gaze, fiddling instead with the remote, turning the volume down until the announcer's words faded to a murmur. Sarah pressed gently. "No one's used it in years, not even for storage." "Not anymore." He stood abruptly, signaling the end of the conversation. "Appreciate the cookies. Good luck settling in." She left with a polite smile, but the door clicked shut behind her a little too firmly. Back in 3B, she paced the living room, the unease settling deeper. The cookies sat untouched on her counter, suddenly unappetizing. Why the evasion? Ellis knew something, or at least he wasn't telling. The building felt smaller now, its walls pressing in with secrets. That night, the rain came harder, drumming against the roof like impatient fingers. Sarah tried reading, a mystery novel from the library, ironic in its predictability, but her mind wandered. Around 10, as she marked her page, the thump returned. Not from below this time, but closer, vibrating through the floorboards under her feet. She slipped on her slippers and stepped into the hall, the carpet muffling her steps. The corridor was empty, doors closed like sealed lips. She knelt by the vent near the stairs, ear pressed close. There, a scrape, faint but unmistakable, like something sliding across the floor far below. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she descended to the first floor, the stairs groaning under her weight. The basement door stood ajar. The chain looped loosely over the knob as if someone had passed through recently. Had Ellis been down here, or Mrs. Harlan? She glanced around, no one in sight. The lobby clock ticked softly, marking the seconds. Pushing the door open, the cool air rushed up, carrying a musty tang that clung to her clothes. The bulb at the bottom flickered on as she descended, casting jittery shadows along the concrete walls. The hallway stretched unchanged, locked doors, dust motes dancing in the light. But now she noticed details she'd missed before, a faint scuff mark on the floor, fresh, leading to the third door on the left. It was unlocked, the padlock dangling open like an oversight. She shouldn't, she knew, but the pull was stronger than caution. Turning the knob, the door swung inward with a whisper. Inside was a small room, shelves sagging under boxes labelled in faded marker. Holiday decor, tools, misc, nothing out of the ordinary. Yet, as she scanned the space, her eyes caught on a corner shelf, empty except for a single item, a worn notebook, its cover cracked leather. She reached for it, fingers brushing the edge, when the thump echoed again, loud and close, from the adjacent room. Sarah froze, the notebook slipping from her grasp. It hit the floor with a soft thud, pages fluttering open to reveal handwritten notes, dates, times, cryptic phrases like "heard at 2:14" and "not alone." Her breath caught. Whose was this? Before she could bend to pick it up, footsteps sounded from the hallway, heavy, deliberate, approaching. She backed out, pulling the door shut just as a shadow stretched across the threshold. Heart hammering, she slipped toward the stairs, but the footsteps didn't follow. They stopped at the door she'd just closed, a pause that stretched eternal. Then a low murmur, like voices arguing in whispers, too muffled to make out words. Climbing back up, she burst into the lobby, gulping air. The door below swung shut on its own, the chain rattling into place. No one emerged. Shaking, she hurried to her apartment, locking the door and sliding the chain across. Leaning against it, she listened. Nothing. Just the rain. Sleep was impossible after that. She sat at the kitchen table, the notebook's words burned into her mind, though she hadn't read more than a glimpse. Who kept track of the noises, and why hide it down there? The building's quiet returned, but it felt mocking now, a veil over whatever stirred beneath. The next morning, sunlight pierced the clouds, and Millford buzzed with its usual calm. Kids on bikes, a truck rumbling down the street toward the fields. Sarah drove to the grocery store, loading her cart with essentials, milk, bread. Things to fill the fridge and her thoughts. At the checkout, the cashier, a young woman with a name tag reading Tina, chatted idly. "New in town? Saw your car at the old Elm Street place." "Yeah, just moved into the apartments." Tina's smile faltered. "Nice building, quiet, they say." She bagged the items slowly. "My aunt used to live there back in the day. Said it had quirks." "Like what?" Tina shrugged, glancing over her shoulder. "Nothing specific, just old places, you know? Echoes." She handed over the receipt, her eyes kind but evasive. Sarah drove home with the windows down, the fresh air doing little to clear the fog in her head. Parking in the lot, she noticed Ellis's truck was gone. Work, maybe. The building loomed, its windows blank stares. Unloading groceries, she paused at the mailboxes, rifling through hers. Bills, junk mail, and a plain envelope. No stamp, just her name in block letters. Inside her apartment, she tore it open. A single sheet of paper typed, "Some things are best left undisturbed. The basement stays closed for a reason." No signature. Her hands trembled as she crumpled it, tossing it in the trash. A prank. From Ellis warning her off, or Mrs. Harlan playing gatekeeper? The words twisted in her gut, amplifying the isolation. She was the newcomer here, the outsider probing at threads no one wanted pulled. As evening crept in, the thump sounded once more, fainter, almost inviting. Sarah didn't move this time. She sat in the dim light, staring at the door, wondering how deep the quiet went, and what it was hiding, waiting for her to uncover. Sarah spent the following days in a haze, the crumpled note burning a hole in her trash bin like a guilty secret. She retrieved it once, smoothing the paper under the kitchen light, rereading the typed words until they blurred. Some things are best left undisturbed. It could be anyone. Ellis with his evasive glances, Mrs. Harlan with her watchful smile, even the quiet couple from the first floor whose door she passed without a word exchanged. The building's silence amplified every creak, every distant car door slamming in the lot, turning neighbors into suspects in her mind. She threw herself into job hunting with renewed focus, driving to the edge of Millford, where a strip mall held a temp agency and a coffee shop advertising for baristas. The agency lady, a middle-aged woman named Bev, with a perm and sensible shoes, scanned Sarah's resume over her reading glasses. "Divorce, huh? Fresh start's the best medicine. We've got openings at the feed store, inventory, nothing glamorous but steady hours." Sarah nodded, forcing enthusiasm, but her thoughts drifted to the notebook's scrawled entries, heard at 2:14. What had been heard, and by whom? The coffee shop interview went smoother. The manager, a chatty guy in his 30s, who talked about the lunch rush and the best way to foam milk. "You'll fit right in. Locals love a familiar face." She left with a start date for next week, a small victory that should have lifted the weight, but it didn't. Driving back along the county road, fields of corn whispering in the breeze, she caught herself glancing in the rearview mirror more than usual, half expecting to see the building's shadow trailing her. That afternoon, she stopped at the hardware store for light bulbs. The hallway one had finally given out, leaving her floor in a perpetual twilight. The clerk, an older man with grease-stained hands, rang her up slowly. "Elm Street Apartments. Heard you folks had some plumbing work last week." Sarah paused, hand on her wallet. "Plumbing? I didn't hear anything." He shrugged, bagging the bulbs. "Just what the delivery guy mentioned. Pipes down below acting up again." Below. The word hung, casual but pointed. She thanked him and left, the bag crinkling against her leg as she hurried to her car. Was that the thump? Maintenance she wasn't told about? But Mrs. Harlan hadn't mentioned workers, and the basement door remained chained, undisturbed as far as she could tell. Back home, the parking lot was empty save for a stray cat batting at a leaf. Sarah climbed the stairs, the bulbs tucked under her arm, and paused at the first-floor landing. The basement door stared back, its chain glinting dully. She reached out, fingers brushing the metal. Cool. Solid. No give. But as she pulled away, a faint vibration hummed through her soles, like the building settling deeper into the earth. She shook it off, heading up to her unit. Unpacking the groceries from earlier, she noticed something off. The milk carton, which she'd placed front and center in the fridge, was now pushed to the side, behind a jar of pickles she hadn't touched. Her heart stuttered. Had she moved it? The move-in chaos, maybe, or fatigue playing tricks. She closed the door firmly, telling herself it was nothing, but the doubt seeded, sprouting questions. Was someone coming in while she was out? The lock was old, the kind that jiggled if you rattled the knob just right. Evening brought a deceptive calm. Sarah cooked stir-fry from a kit, the sizzle of vegetables filling the air with garlic and normalcy. She ate on the balcony, watching the sun dip behind the rooftops, painting the sky in bruised purples. A few lights winked on across the lot. Ellis's truck was back, parked crookedly. The elderly couple's window glowed warm, shadows moving like figures in a diorama. For a moment, the world felt ordinary, the kind of suburban quiet she'd craved after Chicago's clamor. But as she cleared the dishes, the thump returned, not from below, but from the wall adjoining her bedroom. A single, deliberate rap, like a knuckle testing the plaster. She froze at the sink, suds dripping from her hands. It came again, softer, almost polite. From Ellis's side? She wiped her hands and approached the wall, pressing her ear against it. Silence, thick and expectant. Then, faintly, a murmur, words indistinct like a phone conversation, muffled by distance. "Not now." "Wait for the right time." Sarah pulled back, pulse racing. She knocked lightly in response, a tentative tap-tap. Nothing. The murmur faded, leaving only the hum of the fridge. Grabbing her keys, she stepped into the hall, the door clicking shut behind her. Ellis's door was inches away, a sliver of light under it. She raised her fist to knock, then hesitated. What would she say? "I heard you talking to the wall." It sounded ridiculous, the paranoia of a newcomer. Instead, she descended to the lobby, needing air, needing distance. The space was empty, the mailboxes casting long shadows in the low light. As she reached for her keys to head out for a walk, a sound stopped her, the scrape of metal from the basement door. She turned slowly, watching the chain unlink itself, link by link, as if tugged by invisible hands. The door eased open an inch, then two, revealing the yawning darkness of the stairs. Her breath caught, feet rooted. Wind? A draft from somewhere? But the lobby felt still, airless. From the gap, a cool breath wafted up, carrying that earthy tang, stronger now, laced with something metallic like old coins. She took a step closer, peering down. The bulb at the bottom flickered erratically, illuminating the hallway in strobes, empty doors, scuffed floor, and there, the notebook's door, ajar, where she'd left it locked. No, she hadn't locked it. Panic clawed up her throat. Had someone been down there since, or was it never locked to begin with? The murmur echoed again, clearer this time, rising like smoke. She's listening. Closer now. Sarah slammed the door shut, fumbling the chain back into place, her hands shaking so badly the links clattered. She backed away, bumping into the wall, eyes fixed on the barrier. The building responded with a groan, beams shifting overhead as if sighing in disapproval. She fled up the stairs, bursting into her apartment and double-checking the locks, the chain, even wedging a chair under the knob. Pacing the living room, she replayed it all. The note, the moved milk, the wall taps, the door opening on its own. Coincidences, her rational side argued, the stress of change manifesting in shadows. But the irrational whispered louder. The building was alive, or at least aware. Its quiet, a deliberate hush over buried truths. The notebook's phrases looped in her head, not alone. Who wasn't? Her, or whatever lurked below? She didn't sleep that night, sitting by the window with a mug of cold tea, watching the lot. At 2:14 exactly, the clock's glow confirmed it. The thump sounded, synchronized from directly beneath her floor, not random, intentional. A signal, perhaps, or a warning. Dawn crept in slowly, grey light filtering through the blinds, but the unease lingered, coiling tighter. Sarah knew she couldn't ignore it anymore. Tomorrow she'd confront Mrs. Harlan, demand answers about the basement, the noises, the past. Or she'd go back down herself, notebook in hand, and uncover what the quiet was so desperate to conceal. By morning, the resolve hardened, but so did the isolation. As she dressed for her first shift at the coffee shop, another envelope waited in her mailbox. No stamp, her name in those same block letters. Inside, a single line. Disturbing it won't make it go away. She pocketed it, the paper crackling like dry leaves, and stepped out into the day, the building's gaze heavy on her back. The thump echoed faintly as she drove away, a promise that the wait was ending. Sarah arrived at the coffee shop with the warning note folded tightly in her pocket, its words pressing against her thigh like a bruise. The morning rush was in full swing, locals in flannel shirts and work boots lining up for their black coffee and danishes, the air thick with the grind of beans and chatter about the weather. Her manager, Dave, clapped her on the shoulder as she tied on her apron. "First day's always a whirlwind, but you'll get the hang of it. Just keep smiling." She nodded, forcing a grin, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the thump that had followed her to the car, steady as a heartbeat. The hours blurred in a rhythm of steaming milk and ringing registers, the normalcy a fragile shield. Customers came and went. The farmer with his thermos, the high school teacher grabbing a latte between classes, Tina from the grocery store waving hello. Sarah poured, wiped counters, made small talk about Millford's upcoming harvest festival. But her eyes darted to the clock every few minutes. By noon, her shift break rolled around, and she stepped outside to the strip mall's cracked pavement, the sun warm but unconvincing against the chill in her bones. She drove back to Elm Street with the windows down, the radio tuned low to a classic rock station, guitars wailing softly. The building came into view too soon, its brick facade unchanging, windows reflecting the blue sky like indifferent mirrors. Parking in her spot, she lingered in the car, staring at the entrance. The resolve from dawn hadn't faded, but doubt gnawed at its edges. What if confronting Mrs. Harlan only brought more evasion? What if the basement held nothing but dust and regret? Yet the pull was magnetic, the quiet demanding she listen. Grabbing her keys, she entered the lobby, the door swinging shut with a familiar whoosh. The mailboxes stood sentinel, and she checked hers out of habit. Empty. For once. Mrs. Harlan's door was at the far end, slightly ajar as always, a wedge of light spilling out. Sarah knocked lightly, her knuckles rapping against the wood. "Mrs. Harlan? It's Sarah from 3B. Can I talk to you for a minute?" The door creaked open wider, and the landlady appeared, her face lined with the kind of weariness that comes from too many unspoken burdens. She wore a faded cardigan over a floral blouse, her hair pinned back neatly. "Sarah, dear, shift over already? Come in, I was just putting on tea." The apartment smelled of chamomile and lemon polish, cozy in a way that felt staged. Knickknacks lined the shelves, porcelain figurines, framed photos of a younger Mrs. Harlan with a man in military uniform, probably long gone. Sarah sat on the edge of a floral couch, hands clasped in her lap. "I appreciate it, but this won't take long. It's about the basement, the noises. They've been getting worse, and I found something down there. A notebook, with notes about sounds, times. Someone's been keeping track." Mrs. Harlan paused mid-stride, teacup rattling faintly on the saucer. Her eyes, sharp behind her glasses, met Sarah's for a long moment before she set the tray down. "Notebook? You went down there? I told you it's off limits." "I had to. The door was open, and the thumps, they're not just the building settling, and these notes." Sarah pulled the crumpled warnings from her pocket, unfolding them on the coffee table. "These showed up in my mail, no stamps, just threats, telling me to leave it alone." The landlady's face paled, but she didn't touch the papers. Instead, she sank into the armchair opposite, folding her hands tightly. "Those aren't threats, Sarah. They're cautions." She sighed, the sound heavy, like exhaling a decade's weight. This building. It's seen things. People come and go, but some leave pieces behind. Echoes, you might say. Sarah leaned forward, the room suddenly smaller. What kind of echoes? The notebook mentioned "not alone," heard at 2:14. Is there someone down there? Squatting or... "No one living, no." Mrs. Harlan's voice dropped, eyes drifting to the floor. "It started years ago after the war. My husband, he managed the place back then. Tenants would complain about noises from below. At first, we thought rats or the old boiler, but it was more personal. A woman in 2B, she lost her boy in the Pacific, started hearing his footsteps in the basement, tapping out Morse code from his letters. She'd go down nights, waiting for messages that never came clear." Sarah's skin prickled, the story settling like fog. "And the others? Ellis? The couple downstairs? They hear it too?" "Mrs." Harlan nodded slowly. "Everyone does, eventually. The thumps, the murmurs, it's the building remembering, or us, projecting what we can't let go. That notebook? Probably Ellis's. He lost his wife to illness, spends nights mapping the sounds, trying to make sense. The chain's not to keep something out, it's to keep us in from chasing ghosts that aren't there. Or are they? Hard to say." The words hung, twisting Sarah's thoughts. Was that it? Collective grief, woven into the walls like insulation? but the door opening on its own, the moved milk, tricks of the mind, or something more deliberate. She thought of her own losses, the divorce's hollow ache, the photos she'd hung like talismans. Had the quiet amplified her own echoes, turning them into thumps? "I don't know what to believe," Sarah whispered, standing, "but it feels real, too real." Mrs. Harlan rose too, her hand gentle on Sarah's arm. "That's the point, dear. It always does. Best to let it fade. New routines help. Your job, friends at the diner. The sound's quiet when you stop listening so hard." Sarah left with a murmured thanks, the door clicking shut behind her. The lobby felt colder now, the basement door a silent sentinel. She climbed to her floor, the stairs echoing her footsteps, each one mirroring the thump she'd chased. In her apartment, she sank onto the couch, staring at the wall that separated her from Ellis. No murmurs tonight, just the distant tick of a clock. As dusk fell, painting the room in greys, Sarah unpacked the last of her boxes, not books or clothes, but a small wooden box from her old life, containing letters from her ex, words of love turned to regret. She hadn't opened it since the move, but now she did, reading by the fading light. The pain was there, sharp but familiar, like the building's rhythm. At 2:14, the clock chimed softly from the kitchen. The thump came, right on cue, vibrating through the floor. But this time Sarah didn't freeze. She closed the box, tucking it away, and turned on a lamp. The light pushed back the shadows and the sound. It softened, retreating into the walls. Days passed, blending into weeks. The coffee shop became her anchor, laughing with Dave over burnt batches, memorizing orders for the regulars. She joined a book club at the library, tentative conversations easing the isolation. The notes stopped, the door stayed chained, and the thumps grew sporadic, like echoes fading in wind. Yet some nights, when the rain pattered against the windows and Millford slept under a blanket of stars, Sarah would wake to the quiet, not empty but full, whispers of what lingered below, in the basement no one used. She never went back down, never asked Ellis or the couple about their losses, but in the hush she wondered, were the sounds the buildings or hers? And if she listened too closely again, would they call her name? The building stood on, sentinel to its secrets, waiting for the next newcomer to hear the call.